Hello and welcome to Double Feature Reviews. I'm Libby.
I'm David.
And today we're talking about Superbad and Project X. David, had you seen either of these films before?
I had seen Superbad. I might have seen it twice.
Okay.
I might have seen it in theaters and again on home video with a friend. That sounds right. I definitely remembered the movie pretty well. I don't think I have seen Project X before. I think this was my first Project X.
I had not seen either of these. These films were recommended by my niece. So even though these are both millennial era films, high school movies that came out when millennials were in high school, and my niece is Gen Z, she's apparently a fan.
I think Project X positions itself as a Gen Z movie.
Really?
Yes, as a movie that is, I think it's very intentionally responding against millennial teendom and for maybe not Gen Z, but post-classical millennial teendom. I think that's really what differentiates these movies. I remember while we were watching the films, you said, when we were talking about Superbad as opposed to Project X, you said, no, Superbad is about 70s styling, not 80s styling, in response to something in the movie where some character was trying to be 80s, and the movie wouldn't let them do that.
The bad character has an 80s haircut, right. And most other characters have, for a film that appears to be set in the late 2000s, the late aughts, some, frankly, anachronistic hairstyles.
And I think Project X is positioning itself firmly in the 80s party movie genre or style, whereas Superbad is very much positioning itself in the 70s party movie or style. I mean, Project X is basically a remake of Risky Business, the most 80s film ever made, and Superbad is, I would say, quite inspired by Dazed and Confused, the most 70s teen movie that there is. So I actually think the cultural commentary that we're seeing here is that Superbad is kind of a millennials movie, people who like 60s and 70s stuff, whereas Project X is a post-millennial movie, people who think 80s and 90s stuff is what we got to go back to.
I disagree. And this is where I'm going to bring up a relevant point, which is that I did in fact go to a high school.
That's a great point.
David did not attend a public high school. So I was class of 2010. So this film came out 2 years after I graduated, was presumably in production, the early stages of production, when I would have been the age of these characters. This movie is about me. I felt so immersed. What an accurate depiction of the millennial high school experience. And I agree, it's got some more like POMO forward-thinking filmmaking techniques. And it's got, maybe that short attention span approach to storytelling that we associate.
That's definitely a different stylistically
with Gen Z. But the characters that it's about are so extremely millennial. The styling is extremely millennial. And when I was watching Superbad, to me that really felt... I believe Seth Rogen is a Gen X. I think he's a younger Gen X.
Yes, that's right.
So Seth Rogen had writer.
He's an older Gen X.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Well, he's... Seth Rogen...
I guess I was just watching him from 2007, so he was younger then.
Yeah.
I felt like this was a Gen X trying to tell a high school story that would be relevant to millennials. Well,
we're going to have to peek a little bit into the production history here, because Seth Rogen and his partner...
Let's hold off and let's just real quickly...
We're going to get into it.
Let's just real quickly give our series titles.
Okay.
So I've got a short one. Do you want me to go first?
Sure.
Okay. I definitely was playing around with some ideas for longer titles, but I really would like to get back to some shorter ones. So I'm going for a mathematical expression, parties, the greater than sign, and then friends. Because both of these are kind of down on friendship, I think.
I think that's fair. I see I've been put in a position here because my title is actually a bit longer, and it's quite academic, all things considered. So my title is Gods of Cringe, the rise of post-ironic party cinema. And to some extent, we can only look at these characters as they are presented, and they are certainly gods of cringe. That's not actually the main thing I'm going for there. I think for both of these movies, they are classic products of the brand of the producers that created these movies. Superbad is a Judd Apatow film, and it helped to legitimize the Judd Apatow style significantly, and it's definitely in his trademark. And Project X is a Todd Phillips film, who made like The Hangover and stuff, and it's very much representative of, shall we say, his style and worldview. And I think we can see the two great leading bro comedy creative minds taking their own stab at this issue. And the rise of post-ironic party cinema, I think, again, I'm trying to mark this transition, which I think we are seeing here, about the different cultural values that people expect from teen movies.
So I know that these films are a little different than the types of movies we typically cover, although we have covered some bros in the past.
We're going to do all the movie types. I've signed us up to do every movie, so we're going to have to get through them.
I have not, so if you want to do some episodes by yourself, honey, you can go for that. But if you decided to not watch these films, David's going to give you some idea of what was going on in them.
So, Superbad is a teen comedy. It's about three friends who have grown reliant on each other for their social life, who have a wild night in all the wrong ways, trying to pick up some booze and make it to the graduation party where their crushes are. In the first scene, Evan picks up his friend Seth for school. That's our cat. Hi, Nova.
Hi, Nova.
In the first scene, Evan picks up his friend Seth for school and talks to his hot mom about how they didn't get into the same college. In the final scene, Seth and Evan meet up with the girls whom they very much did not successfully hook up at the party last night and manage to land a second chance with them. Project X is also a teen comedy. It's about three friends who are struggling to be popular, who throw an epic house party that goes too right when they attract thousands of teens, the police, an angry drug dealer, and the girls they have crushes on. In the first scene, Costa and Dax invade their friend Thomas's house to begin filming their party documentary and discover his parents haven't actually left yet. In the final scene, Costa goes live on TV to wear sunglasses, refuse to apologize, and promote his next party.
I do have one slight correction, which says that I don't think Dax and Thomas know each other at the start of the film.
Oh, is that right? That's where they're being introduced?
I think Thomas says, "Who is that?"
Oh, I kind of think you might be
and
right.
Then we see, and Costa says he's JB's, probably includes a homophobic slur, friend from AV or whatever.
I thought that Thomas, at that moment, I think you're right. I was remembering that Thomas was saying, I only recognize this person because I know they're in AV club. But I think your interpretation is more accurate.
Yeah, I think that's the only way they had to introduce Dax, who is behind the camera, at least diegetically, most of the time.
Dax could not be a more stereotypical bad boy filmmaker character. If you got to have the filmmaker character actually be like a real bad boy. He's bad.
But we'll get into him a little bit more when we talk about Project X. Sticking with Superbad for now. We're a little bit confused because we have decided to talk about these in the order of Superbad, Project X. That's actually not the order we watched them in, and we'll talk about all that at the end. So Superbad, it's a 2007 film. It is directed by Greg Mottola, written by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. It stars Michael Cera as Evan, who we all remember from Barbie. Jonah Hill as Seth. The main character is named after one of the writers.
Just to be clear, both of the main characters are named after both of the
writers.
Yes,
Evan and Seth, yes. Christopher Mintz-Plasse as Fogel. Bill Hader as Officer Slater. Seth Rogen as Officer Michaels. Martha McIsaac as Becca. And Emma Stone, who we just watched in The Favorite. And in that episode, we sort of indirectly and perhaps scathingly referred to this role, which is Jules in this film.
Emma Stone has done worse written material. She always does a great job. She did a good job here.
Yeah.
That's not a criticism of Emma Stone.
Yeah, I think collaborating with Yorgos Lanthimos has been huge for her.
We talked about that in the episode,
Yes.
and it just could not be more true. It's gone great. So, to your point, Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg wrote this script, the first draft of it, when they were 13 years old.
Wow.
And they wrote it about themselves. So it's not like, oh, the characters happen to be named for the writers. No, they're them. Seth is Seth Rogen was originally going to star in the film as Jonah Hill's character, but he was too old. He was too old. So they got Jonah Hill instead.
Who is also too old, for the record.
Yes. Well, they didn't want to hire him for a long time. People kept saying, Jonah Hill would fit this character perfectly, but they said he's
3
too
years
old.
ago.
But they did it anyway. And by the conventional measures, it did in fact work out. So they wrote the first draft when they were 13 years old as teens living in Vancouver, and they continued to work on this throughout their high school years, and as they aged up, the characters aged up with them and the story matured. But many of the events in the movie are coming from their real life. They really did steal a keg and then have to unload all the beer into detergent jugs and carry that around to parties.
Detergent is good at like clinging to things. How did they manage to get all of the soap taste out of the outside of the detergent barrel? You'd have to like fill it up and then empty it. I just imagine dozens of times in order to not have that beer taste like soap.
Yeah. Did
it just taste like it just tasted like soap.
I'm guessing the teens at these parties haven't drunk that much beer. That's the best thing I can say about it. There is a real Fogel, their best friend, really was named Fogel, and the real Fogel was a consultant on the movie and was on set with Christopher discussing the character. When American Pie came out in 1999, they were like, oh no, they made our movie, a raunchy teen comedy. We were going to invent that. But then they realized that that movie didn't have any actual characters, and they were trying to make a story that had actual characters.
And, more than one teen movie could potentially be popular.
A shocking idea. So Seth Rogen ended up being connected with Judd Apatow, and again, though Seth Rogen is the creative force, and Evan Goldberg, they invented this movie. It was their idea. They wrote the scripts, their characters. So much about the aesthetic of the movie and how we appreciate it, again, is coming from the classic Judd Apatow style. Judd Apatow, he made Heavyweights. That was one of his first feature films. He made, very much related to this film, the one-year television series Freaks and Geeks in 1999. Probably the best teen TV show that there is. So if you liked this movie and you wanted something a little bit more on that witty family side, you might really like Freaks and Geeks. Although it does much more lean into the after-school special moralistic side. But yeah, Apatow made 40-Year-Old Virgin.
I thought this one actually was fairly moralistic.
Yeah, and I think that, again, is the thing that really differentiates it from Project X. I agree with you. It's actually a pretty sappy movie, honestly. It's a pretty sentimental movie as well. So he made 40-Year-Old Virgin, Talladega Nights, Anchorman, Knocked Up, Forgetting Sarah Marshall, Funny People. He did Girls, the TV show, his recent pieces, The King of Staten Island. So all of those are Judd Apatow films. And so Seth Rogen got involved with Judd Apatow and sort of became part of... Judd Apatow is great at finding comedy talent. If you go look at where people got their start, for a lot of big-name comedians, they are coming through Judd Apatow. So he was one of the stars of Freaks and Geeks when he was 16 or 17. He starred in Judd's TV show and helped as a writer and creative contributor on a lot of his early projects. And then he sort of said, well, I have a movie that I wrote when I was 13-year-old. How about we do this movie? We already talked about how Jonah Hill was brought in as the replacement for Seth Rogen. Michael Cera was an immediate cast. They were, a Michael Cera guy.
His audition was Arrested Development.
Yeah, it is interesting how Michael Cera really is a groundbreaking performer at bringing the charismatic dweeby guy to I
don't think he plays charismatic characters. Sweet dweeb.
Thank you. Sweet dweeby guy to new heights. I don't think there is anyone that has achieved the same level of stardom, and it really kind of starts with this film.
I'm a huge fan of Arrested Development, so I would disagree.
It's almost a different, I guess. Well, he's more childish in Arrested Development.
Yeah, he's younger.
He's just a younger person. Greg Modela, who is probably best known for directing the New York suburban dramedy Day Trippers, was brought in to direct this. He was the only director who looked at the script and wasn't like, this is like gross and crass. I'm not going to try to make this into a good movie. He was like, oh, I get it. We're trying to push the edge. It was shot on a $20 million budget starting on September 18th, 2006. and it was released on September 17th, 2007, 364 days after photography started. So pretty quick turnaround, all things considered, for a movie at this scale. It was a success. It made $170 million in the box office, so that's $150 million in profit, 750% profit. That's really good money. It has a 88% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It has a 7.6 on IMDb with 661,000 votes. There definitely were people who thought it was too crude. There were people who thought that it was too sentimental. There were people who thought that it was too boring. But most people thought that it was funny. It was considered a very, very funny movie at the time. And I think we remember when it came out, it was very much quotable. Even though people wasn't exactly what people wanted to become, they did find it entertaining. And the character of McLovin, especially, who does have the B story in the film. A lot of people comment in the scriptwriting community about how he really doesn't have very much time on screen. I think it's something like 10 to 15 minutes of McLovin content in the movie.
And McLovin is Fogel, but he goes by the name McLovin for much of the film, and that's right. Just a much more fun name, so I think we're just going to call him McLovin.
But to hear people talk about it, especially in the couple years after it came out, people acted like McLovin was the main character of the movie. And mainly people talked about the outrageous McLovin cop liquor store elements, and the main plot of the movie was just kind of in the background as another teen movie. That does seem to have shifted a little bit. People are more interested in the relationship between Seth and Evan, but McLovin was a hit. There's no way around it. This did not receive any attention from the Oscars or the BAFTAs. Shocking. So yeah, I think for a raunchy teen comedy, clearly it has a real intention of having a heart and presenting characters that are conventionally lovable, that we feel sorry for them and want them to succeed in their own way. Jonah Hill is definitely pushing against that, trying to be an obnoxious, annoying teen character. And we don't...
You say Jonah Hill, do you think the actor was trying to do that, or you think in the script the character is trying to do that?
Yeah, it's hard to say if Seth Rogen intended to write his character to be quite that unlikable, but I think probably. I think, they were all kind of in on the joke. And, to some extent, we're supposed to sort of root for Michael Cera's journey of losing his virginity, which is really what the main plot of the movie is about. We don't really root for Seth, and Seth is less successful than Michael Cera, than Evan. He sort of straddles...
No, they both accidentally punch the girls that they like, but it seemed to end up with them at the end anyway.
Yeah, it's a perfect metaphor, I feel like, for Emma Stone's career again. Yeah. The final scene of this movie, where she's sort of forced by the plot to forgive Seth and go with the relationship that clearly she is a terrible idea and won't make her happy, but she's the hottest lady, and so she has to get with the most unattractive guy. That's basically the formula of the film.
But at least it's only going to be for a couple months before they all leave and go to college.
Yeah, that's a fair point. To some extent, this movie, I think, is about 60s and 70s idealism. One of the first things in the early scenes of the movies that we find out is that they love the Beatles. Seth talks about something being cool. It was as good as the first time you heard the Beatles. And, I think that's something that you and I can identify with as millennials that love the Beatles. They got us on that one.
The Beatles 1 came out when we were, 11 or something. My dad got it for me for Christmas because he was trying to make me cool. And it worked. That's basically the coolest I ever got.
So, I think even to a millennial audience, part of why the Seth and Evan story was less interesting than the McLovin story is because it was kind of sappy. And, I have close friends and people I have great friendships with. I didn't have anyone in high school that I had that type of friendship with. I just couldn't identify with...
well, you also didn't go to a high school.
That's fair. I didn't have anyone at that age that I had that type of relationship with.
What do you mean?
That I felt like my social life... I didn't know how to really function properly without them,
Yeah, I didn't have any friends like that, but I think some of my friends were like that. Like, I had friends that I acquired. One of the friends that I acquired in middle school and continued to be my friend into high school. My mom told me that her mom told my mom that I was actually her first friend. Like, this, I think I don't relate to this because I'm much more of an Evan type, but I had Seth's in my orbit. So I think there were people who were dependent on me for their social like if I didn't hang out with them, then they weren't going to hang out with anybody.
You were the vibrant one. Have you seen any other Todd Phillips projects? So, The Road Trip, Old School, Borat, The Hangover, any of the Hangovers?
I don't
Joker.
think I've seen all of Borat, but I have seen meaningful sections of Borat 1 and Borat 2. I don't know if he also did 2.
Have you seen any other Judd Apatow? I think we watched Ricky Bobby Talladega Nights one time together when you were really sick and were sort of looking for a mindless film. Is that the only other Apatow that you've seen?
I believe that is correct.
Didn't we watch Forgetting Sarah Marshall together?
Oh, okay, yes, we did watch, and I was not even sick for that.
That's right. So, did you think that this was... I think you liked Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Mm-hmm. Did you... And I kind of think you kind of liked, but almost disliked Talladega Nights. Where would you put Superbad in that range of sort of fitting your style?
It's worse than both of those.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I just, especially having watched this right after Project X, which basically pulls no punches.
Yeah.
I was really disappointed in the number of punches that were pulled in Superbad. And this did mean I was kind of happy with the ending, because I spent the whole film being afraid that there was going to be some sort of Deus Ex Machina at the end, and Seth and Evan don't have to say goodbye to each other. I thought that, like, Seth actually did get into Dartmouth, or Evan will decide getting a valuable degree is not as important as staying with my friend, or there would be some, like, middle road school that they both decide to go to, or they're like, actually, let's delay college for a year and go backpacking through Europe together. So when they did actually, when the lesson at the end, in the lesson of the final scene was, you do have to learn how to say goodbye to your friends, I was like, okay, I approve.
Yeah, I think we could have easily paired Superbad with the film that I think most directly copies it, which is Booksmart, the Olivia Wilde, I believe her directorial debut, which was the 2019 film, which has a very related plot and a very similar sort of types of character archetypes. And in that movie, the plot is also about them, in theory, going to college together, and it's revealed at the end of the movie, spoilers for Booksmart, that our Michael Cera stand-in is actually choosing to take a gap year and doesn't want to go to college at the same time as their friend. But, that just shows, again, how big of a cultural impact this has, that there are now Superbad copycat and Superbad parody movies that exist. And, I think, to some extent, the character of Costa in Project X is intentionally a reference to the Jonah Hill character. Booksmart is a really, really good movie, actually. It has great filmmaking, great cinematography, great use of sound and imagery, so it's excellently made. It's even sappier than Superbad. And I think Booksmart was a teen movie that ended up being way more appealing to, like, teen girl moms than to teen girls, and to some extent presented a very idealized version of teen girls trying to find their own self, but also was really focused on the deep, supportive, emotional relationship that these two characters had, which really wasn't that funny and isn't that innovative of a storyline.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not opposed to super sappy things. Also, like, we are on record as being big fans of musicals, which tend to be extremely sappy. I just thought the sappiness didn't work in Superbad, where they're trying to be like, look how edgy we are. Ooh, we're making jokes about boobs.
Yeah. Do you think that this is a coming-of-age story? Is that an accurate description of Superbad?
Yeah.
I've heard it called that. Okay,
yeah,
you think so?
Yeah.
Do you think that there is there is real growth in these characters, or do you mean that they, like, find their identity? In what way is this a coming-of-age story?
Yeah, it's what I just said. The lesson that they learn, which is something you have to learn as you get older, is that sometimes you do have to say goodbye to your friends. And also, that's the main one. I think there is also a sort of side lesson that they both learn, which is to just be a little bit more chill about getting laid.
The classic. Do you think that they are the good guys of the story? Are they are they our heroes? Are they protagonists as opposed to just main characters? Because,
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to say because they interact so little with other characters that are important to the story. So, like, Evan and Seth spend most of the film interacting with people who are only really in that sequence. Like, mostly what they do is meet up with Joe Trulio and go to his party and have that dream fantasy about stealing the booze. Jonah Hill thinks of all these different ways in which he would steal the booze. Yeah, so we keep...
Are they on drugs at that point?
No, that's just his...
Okay.
It's sort of his plan /
That's just his fantasy.
That's his fantasy. Somewhere between a fantasy and a plan. A plantasy. And they only really interact with, like, Fogel and Jules and Becca at the very beginning and the very end. And it seems like it's those interactions that are actually core. That is what would determine whether they are protagonists or main characters. And there isn't really enough of that to determine.
Yeah, I mean, they don't really seem to care about Fogel very much as a friend. They're definitely willing to sacrifice him in all sorts of ways. While the film is at the same time very sentimental and sort of wants us to really feel for these people for their friendship, to some extent we do see them being this sort of post-moralistic characters. And you said the film is very moralistic. And I wonder, is it really moralistic or is it just sentimental? Like, nothing that they learn is about society at large, or they don't become less really selfish as the movie goes on. And I don't know, this Superbad doesn't really point to them as necessarily evil, but I've heard some people say that they are the villains of the story. And they're the actually, what are your thoughts?
I think the way that the film sets up Evan and Seth is different, is like not particularly related to the way it concludes. So the beginning, I at least sort of felt like, oh, the issue is Seth is trying to drag Evan down. Evan might end up not going to Dartmouth just so he can continue hanging out with Seth. And like Seth is this millstone who's both making Evan less likable. Seth is so unlikable that by hanging out with him, Evan is less likable by association. But then at the end, it seems like they're trying to say, oh, the story was actually about these two accepting that they have to go different ways in a sort of value-neutral way. And I feel like that didn't super make sense.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like we do start to see this. To some extent, it's about idealism, and it's about the idealism of being true to your friends, an in-group idealism. It doesn't really matter if you are a good member of society or a good force on the culture. Are you loyal to your best friend or are you not loyal to your best friend?
Well, one thing that I think does address the, are you a good citizen thing is the fact that Evan doesn't have sex with Becca, even when she is really going at it because she's too drunk and he's being a good boy.
Right.
And I don't know, I feel like that issue doesn't come up at the beginning at all. So I don't know if this is a character trait that Evan has acquired throughout the film or if he just always was a nice boy and he continues to do so.
I mean, it does come up at the beginning to some extent. Probably the most famous line of the movie is, "We could be that mistake." That's the most quoted non-McLovin part of the script. The most quoted line is, "I am McLovin," which I've heard many people say in all sorts of contexts in real life. But "We could be that mistake" is like the central line of the plot. And at the time, Evan doesn't push against it, but you can tell he's not totally comfortable with it either. So it does appear he's sort of making his decision.
I think Becca has made it clear enough before the party, when she's not drunk, that she does like Evan.
I see.
I, as the viewer, didn't think, oh, Becca would never have sex with Evan, and she is making a mistake because she got drunk. Like, she kind of says, or her friends tell Evan, she got drunk because she was so, like, psyched out about having sex with you.
That's part of what makes it so unpleasant to watch in the ending scene, where, if they wanted to make it a moralistic film, which, maybe it's not. This is for the bad kids. All right, fine. But if they wanted to make it a moralistic film, we would have seen Evan be able to have a second chance at his relationship, where Seth, who was not acting in a way that was likable or ethical, would not have been able to continue his relationship with Jules. But of course, that's not what happens. So it feels like it has some moralistic ideas in it. Like we kind of get the sense watching that scene, like, oh, I guess Evan is a good guy. Good for him. But again, that seems more like sentimentality than a moralistic message. What do you think Jules actually wants? You know, sometimes Judd Apatow films are criticized for having very thinly written female characters that don't feel like real people. Do you think that's true of Becca and Jules? Are these real characters that want things, or are they just prizes?
Yeah, I think Jules is underwritten. I think Becca, for being a secondary character in a film that has a lot of stuff going on, is fine. She likes Evan and she wants to get with Evan, but they're both just kind of awkward about it.
That's a character.
That's a character. I have no idea what Jules wants.
Yeah. I mean, at first it seems like Jules really likes comedy, and she wants to have a funny, witty time. We do kind of establish that character in the science scene. And I think it would have been a better movie, you can only spend so much time, in the house party scene when Seth and Jules reunite, if it wasn't just like Jules saying, let's just have a nice party, you're being a drunk asshole, which that fits for the story. It would have been nice if they had brought back the like, oh, Jules wants to have a funny, witty joke time, and Seth is too horny and too drunk to participate in that. That would have added up, I think, to more of a character structure. So maybe it was fixable, but yeah, it did kind of stand out to me. Man, Emma Stone. Yorgos we're going to fix this, Emma. Just wait, hold on. You really do feel
You'll
sorry
get that
for
Oscar
her
nomination.
watching these. Yeah. Well, here I am spending all of my time and energy thinking about Seth and Evan. But of course, no one actually cares about Seth and Evan.
We're all here for McLovin.
So, maybe I'm wrong. It seemed like when we were watching the movie, you maybe agreed with the audience that the Seth and Evan part was kind of boring, but you did seem to kind of enjoy the McLovin part.
The jokes were better.
Why do people love McLovin so much, Libby? Why? Why do they love him?
So there's a lot of theories about why humans laugh. One of them is that laughter is a reaction to surprise. Like, doing that thing with your mouth helps to reconcile. That's what your body does while your brain is having to divert from what it expected to happen to what actually happened. So starting off with picking the name McLovin, either no first name or no last name, just McLovin. What a ridiculous thing to do. I could never have guessed that. Brain's got to reconcile that. And then I think the writers, Seth and Evan, decided, because we had this serious story with like a real plot, film producers want their stories to have like a beginning, middle, and end with the arc where we learn something. So they're like, okay, we're doing that with Seth and Evan. So it's just all fun goofs with McLovin. There doesn't need to be a real plot. I think McLovin also kind of represents a fantasy of like being treated like an adult, which a lot of high schoolers do want to experience. It's like, oh wow, if everyone just treated me like I was an adult, then I could really have fun. And I didn't like the pulled punch with the cops when they said, hey, man, we knew you were an adult the whole time.
Yeah, it's a real letdown.
And when I can barely make sense of this. When we were kids, we thought cops were losers. So we just wanted to show you that cops are cool. I don't know if that's what you showed him. And also, in a post-George Floyd world, which, this was not made in, everyone's reaction to the cops is rather different.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of having a hard time. These are, we do not think these are good, responsible men. But they are sort of like a little goofy and lovable in a way that cops aren't.
Yeah, I think the decision, I think it's very neat storytelling. The decision to, let's have Fogel hook up with a girl that would be too young for real Fogel, for imaginary, for McLovin, but not too young for Fogel. That does connect a lot of threads in the story in a very interesting way. I also think it's a terrible choice for this movie and this plot. And I feel like that moment where the cops basically undo the whole movie and spoil all the fun is driven because they've put the story in this place where they don't have any other way out of it. Where now, like, Fogel's going to go to jail, and one way or other, the whole thing's going to get revealed and it's all going to be ruined. So I think
Fogel could have revealed that. Like, he could have said, I'm actually not 25. You can arrest me for buying alcohol, but you can't arrest me for a statutory rape.
Yeah, I think it would be a fine choice to have McLovin Fogel reveal himself at that moment. I think, again, to not pull the punch, it would be a more interesting movie and sort of, I think, highlight more just how much Seth and Evan have ruined Fogel. To have Fogel, like, actually go to jail. Not necessarily go to prison and be sentenced, but to have him be the victim of their crimes. That would be funnier and would add a little bit of full big tension to the story.
Yeah,
or maybe just come up with a different...
That would then really move us out of, like, the 24-hour span of this party.
Well, he can go to jail that night, and then we cut.
I think another way out they could have had would just have him bolt, like run away from the cops, which has already happened.
That's right.
They've already successfully run away from
There are
him
no track stars.
And then, like, they can't find him because they're looking for someone named McLovin who is not real. And then if they ever see him in real life, he's like, I'm Fogel. Who's McLovin?
Yeah, also, like, maybe the McLovin story doesn't really need this really dark ending about assumed statutory rape.
Yeah.
I don't really think that fit with the rest of the story, and it wasn't funny.
Only when we view it from the perspective of the cops is it a potential statutory rape situation, because the girl he's hooking up with does recognize him. Like, she does. She's like, he's a fellow high schooler. We're just going to hook up.
It's not
and if
like...
the cops weren't involved at all, then that would be fine.
Even if it's not a joke about, oh no, this woman is being abused right now, it's still not a funny situation. Not to me. Not because it's so horrible to think about, because it would be a really horrible situation to be in for everybody.
Yeah, the Evan and Becca not having sex scene, not ending up not having sex scene, did actually have some good jokes in it.
That was maybe the funniest scene in the whole movie.
But I think there were basically none in the Fogel hooking up scene.
Yeah, it took a really weird tonal shift. It became a drama, and then we had to just press rewind. We just had to press rewind on the whole movie.
And also, so the cops introduce what they know are they interrupt what they know are two teenagers having sex to say, hey, you're an adult, stop. And then say, no, we knew you weren't an adult. Let these 17-year-olds hook up.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. And again, not satisfying.
Yeah.
I can identify with what you're saying about the Fogel sequences being nice, kind of, because they have no plot and they can just do the jokes. And one thing that I've noticed, stood out to me when we watched this film, is when Seth is talking about how their plan to get alcohol is totally falling apart. He says, this thing has been fucked since Jump Street. And that really stood out to me because, of course, a few years later, Jonah Hill would star in the remake of the 21 Jump Street series. And I have to say, so 21 Jump Street is the Todd Phillips, not who made Superbad, but who made Project X, is the Todd Phillips project that I actually really like. I actually really like the 21, 22 Jump Street movies because they don't have a plot. They don't require me to, like, approve of anything ethically or even think about that. It's all just crazy top-of-the-line gags. And I think that's where the bro comedy can work. When you just let it be really funny and ridiculous situation, it works. But once you start trying to dig into the real social issues, that's where I think it makes me wish I was watching 21 Jump Street.
So does this mean you would like to move on to Project X now?
Let's do it.
Okay. This is a 2012 film directed by Nima Nourizadeh, written by Matt Drake and Michael Bacall. It stars Thomas Mann as Thomas, Oliver Cooper as Costa, Jonathan Daniel Brown as JB, Dax Flame as Dax, and Kirby Bliss Blanton as Kirby. So everyone's got their own names, at least their own first names.
Yeah, the Superbad and Project X team made the metadata a lot easier for us. They heard that our last episode the metadata was complicated, so they just kept all the names the same.
Yeah, thank you.
So this is a Todd Phillips project. Now we're moving to the other side. Maybe we might say the rougher side of the bro comedy world. So Todd Phillips did Road Trip, Old School, Borat, only the first one, Hangovers 1, 2, and 3, 21, 22 Jump Street, and Joker 1 and 2. That's all Todd Phillips. it's been widely speculated that this film is based on a real event when a person, Corey Worthington, in Australia in 2008 threw a crazy party that the police came and turned into a riot. And then, as you probably have seen the meme, he went on the news and refused to apologize, wore sunglasses, and promoted his next party.
I'm not taking off my glasses.
They're famous.
I would actually phrase that as he was subjected to a really unprofessional interview.
Yeah, it is interesting. You know, at the time, the headline was, "Oh, the world's most annoying teenager. Watch him be annoying." But he really wins that interview.
Yeah.
The interviewer should have just let him keep his glasses on and apologize. He would have made a fool of himself. He's not eloquent, but poor interviewing skills.
She insisted on also making herself look bad. And possibly she was told to do this by her producers.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure she was.
I don't want to blame this specific woman.
I'm sure she was. Yeah. So, just to be clear, Corey Worthington did not throw an awesome party. That's not what happened.
It was a bad time and everyone hated it?
Corey Worthington had his parents' house, and he tried to invite as many people. He did invite thousands of people, and he was charging people at the door to get in. So this was a money-making scheme. And then some people did pay, and it was like a bowl of chips and a little speaker. There was no party. The house couldn't actually support that many people. So when the hundreds of people showed up, most of them weren't allowed in because they just were told they were at capacity. And the few people who did get in had a terrible time. So all of the violence and riot was not about, oh, we have this great party and we don't want the police to shut us down. It's, we got scammed by Corey Worthington to go to this terrible party, and now I wasted my money, and now I'm mad I'm going to start breaking things.
I'd also like to ask, did you know anything about Dax Flame before watching this?
I know that he was a YouTuber. Do you know anything about him?
Yeah, so he was big in relatively early YouTube, like 2010. I have been addicted to YouTube since 2007, so I'm a YouTube historian.
He's old school, you're telling me.
He's not the oldest of old school. He's not Lisa Nova or Lonely Girl 15, Deep Cut, HMC Girl, or early days of Vlogbrothers. He's not quite that old. He's wave 2 of YouTube. I don't think I watched any of his stuff when it was coming out, but I did go watch one of his very early vlogs where he was telling people that he was dressed up as Superman for school. I think this was a themed day, but maybe he was just going to school in a Superman costume. That also could be possible. And I also saw his short film, How the Weast Was Won.
What happens in How the Weast Was Won? Apparently that's the good one.
It's a 5-minute film, which he did all the work on. He's got 2 friends. I haven't seen How the West Was Won, so I don't know to what extent it's a commentary on that. But it's about unexpected friendship and dealing with the loss of that.
So the concept for Project X came from Todd Phillips and his production team. Again, these are really producer-driven films, even though they're not the sole creative contributors, far from it. The script was written by Michael Bacall, and he wrote this at the same time he was writing 21 Jump Street and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. So those movies were not released at the same time, but you can sort of see a connection there. The director had no experience directing feature films before this. He had done, this will shock you, music videos primarily. Well, that shows when you see the movie. And, I think it's fair to say that the music video montages are probably the best filmmaking in the movie, and they are very well done. He directed a series of commercials for Adidas about people going to cool, crazy teen parties. And they said, well, it looks like that's the footage we need. It was filmed on a $12 million budget over 25 days from June to July 2010 at the Warner Brothers Ranch in Southern California. On the first day of filming, the police were called because they thought they was having some giant crazy party they needed to shut down. And they were like, yes, but no.
Are you aware that you're on a film studio, officer?
It doesn't look like a film studio. It looks like a neighborhood, so that's kind of the idea.
Well, isn't it on the Warner Brothers?
Yeah, I guess they'd have to go through the gate.
Yeah.
They were still being too loud, apparently.
Okay.
So it was built at the Warner Brothers Ranch, and actually the pool at the ranch There's a bunch of tunnels all over the property that lead underneath the pool because the pool has a bunch of glass walls. That's how they shot the people swimming around. So apparently that's where all the crew were spending all the time hanging out in the tunnels by the pool where the bad kids go. The film was shot all at night, and it was shot primarily by...
Even the daytime scenes?
No, not the daytime scenes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Primarily at night. And they would film by inviting a couple thousand extras and also just random people that they weren't paying but saw a sign and agreed to show up and just told them to kind of party around for a while. They seeded plants in there, people who had cameras and were filming the party as it was going. But apparently it was a pretty legit 25-night party at the Warner Brothers Ranch, something of an invite to secure. They would do sometimes just like 20 or 30 minutes and say, yeah, just go dance and party, and they would just film that for a while. The film was largely shot in chronological sequence because they knew that they were going to be completely destroying the set as they went, and when they did the big fire sequence, way more stuff caught on fire than was supposed to. It was not supposed to.
In California? I don't believe it.
Yeah.
I didn't know flamethrowers could throw flame that far. It was throwing flame like 30 feet. I thought flamethrowers were doing like 6 feet.
I mean, the action sequence, this is a very well-equipped small-town drug dealer.
Yeah.
Very well-equipped. I mean, he's got a lot of equipment. I didn't like the part where he explodes and then is like, I'm fine right afterwards. That didn't...
Yeah. That is the worst part of the movie.
That is the worst part of the movie. That brought it, like, to a cartoony level that the rest of the movie isn't on. It reminded me of in Superbad when Seth keeps getting hit by cars and is fine. But that actually fits with the cartoony nature of those scenes and is funny in those moments. I did not like the part where they blew him up and he was fine. I thought he should have just been dead. It wasn't like, oh, a lot of horrible things have happened in this movie, but not the drug dealer.
Don't kill T-Rex.
Please. That was not my experience at that moment. It felt a bit silly. Originally, Project X was not going to be the title of the movie. It was supposed to be the point that the movie was very secret because they had to make the movie by inviting on 2,000 extras who weren't quite supposed to know what they were making and ruin the whole marketing campaign. But then word got out that there was a bunch of cool parties in LA called Project X and it's something to do with the secret movie from the Hangover guy. And they were like, apparently Project X is cool now. So they just went with that and made that the title of the film.
Yeah, I think this is a bad call. I honestly think both Project X and Superbad are pretty bad titles for these movies.
Superbad is weird. I mean, again, the movie is
It's not about being bad.
Not really.
Or super.
I mean, I guess because they're just so raunchy. Maybe that's what we're supposed to get from this.
It wasn't nearly raunchy enough to actually earn that.
Yeah. I've been thinking about it. My best analysis is, the movie is Superbad is very themed around like 70s soul music. Mm-hmm. Actually, do you think there should be an Academy Award for Best Credits? Because if there was one, Superbad, I think, could be a contender for that. It has very strong, entertaining, and tone matching opening and closing credits. The opening and closing credits are some of the best part of the movie.
Yeah, I don't think I want to encourage directors to do more with credits. I think credits, generally, less is more is better. And I don't want to send the wrong message.
You didn't like the dancing or the fun song?
I thought it was... do you mean opening credits or closing credits?
I meant both. In this case, Superbad has... In the opening credits, they have the fun dancing or... could they be nominated for Best Dancing? I think those are them dancing.
In the W's, they can.
And then the closing credits...
Watch out, Moira Shear.
The closing credits are... They sort of make their own 70s soul song about the characters. And then show, I believe, more dick drawings.
Oh, yes, that's where we get the montage. Sorry, I erased that element of Seth's character from my mind, and you just brought it back.
So you're anti-dick drawings. This is definitely the most polarizing part of the film.
I'm dick drawing neutral.
Dick drawing neutral.
I think, again, this movie was trying to decide whether it was a raunchy teen comedy or a sentimental coming-of-age friendship
pulled in
story.
Too many directions.
Yeah, and I was like, if it was just a raunchy comedy, the dick drawings are appropriate. But I don't know what we're doing in this sentimental friendship comedy.
That's not the pairing Libby is looking for.
Correct. And then if any of the characters had ever talked about the party as being Project X, Bam, you got it. Now the title is acceptable. But this title just has nothing to do with anything.
Yeah, it's a shame that they didn't realize they were going to stick with that title long enough to just put one line in there in reshoots, because that would have helped a lot.
Or ADR, voiceover. Mm-hmm. The shots are confusing enough. You can't actually see people's mouths half the time.
Yeah, I wonder if that helped the movie be the financial success that it was, because it was a financial success. It sounds
like it was pretty cheap to do.
It was filmed on a $12 million budget, and it made $102 million. So that's $90 million profit. Again, about 750% profit. Very, very respectable. It was not well received by critics. It has a 28% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. That is the lowest we've ever had.
Wow.
Project X is not my favorite movie.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that it's better than Portrait of a Lady.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's true. Not Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Not talking about Portrait of a Lady on Fire. I'm talking about Portrait of a Lady. But, man, critics really didn't like it. They mainly said that the characters were all really unlikable and they just didn't like them.
Yeah. So I agree. If I may, I would like to liken Project X to Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, in that I find both of these to be very unpleasant experiences. The characters are all pretty awful, and even the ones that seem at the beginning like they might get good, like they might be good, do get pulled into some really gnarly stuff that I don't approve of, and also just almost every line is unpleasant. I also think that it's maybe not quite to the extent of Wuthering Heights, but it is also a really successful work of art. I know that the director had done a lot of music videos. I think this is really close to veering into the mockumentary territory.
Well, it is a found footage. I mean, this is the height of the found footage phenomenon that begins with Blair Witch, and this is about at the end of it. But this is at the peak of gotta have found footage. And we've talked about it before. I'm pro found footage. Mm-hmm. I like epistolary novels. I like when I don't have to put my brain all the way in fiction mode and I have an entrance. I think that's great.
Yeah. So I think one of the reasons that it was panned in reviews is that the reviewers are older, and I think this is a pretty accurate portrait of high schoolers in 2012.
Empire.
So I sort of enjoyed it. Well, I was simultaneously not enjoying it. I sort of enjoyed it just for like the nostalgia.
Melissa Anderson of the Village Voice referred to Costa in the review as that dick in the sweater vest.
I believe that's also he gets referred to as that in the film.
Maybe.
Yeah, I rewatched the beginning. If we get anything wrong about the actual events of these films, I apologize. I was sick, and so we are recording this a week later than we thought we would, so the films are not as fresh as they normally would be. But yeah, so I rewatched the first 20 minutes, and someone does refer to him as that dick in the sweater vest.
Empire's Chris Hewitt called Costa the most annoying movie character since Jar Jar Binks. Do you agree? Disagree?
Have not seen Star Wars.
Oh, Jar Jar Binks trauma.
I don't have an opinion on Jar Jar Binks, and I'm loving it. I'm McLovin' it.
Wow. I did not expect Livy to become really pro Jar Jar Binks in this bit.
No, but I'm McLovin not having an experience with him.
People love this McLovin, guys. Livy saw it for the first time, so she's going through it. We most of us went through it back then, but people love him. They love him. So yeah, critics really didn't like this movie. Audiences liked it, made a lot of money. It has a 6.7 on IMDb with 245,000 votes. Nothing crazy there. But I know people who are fanatic supporters of this film. And what they say they like about it is a movie about people who just want to have a good time. Basically, that it's not moralistic or sentimental. It's just about people who want things to be good for them. And they identify with that. They're like, yeah, I also want things to be good with me. Sometimes in movies they talk about other stuff. I don't care about that.
Yeah, one of the problems I have with this is its total amoralism. So I think at the end, in that scene where the next morning our three lads come back into school and they get I don't think they actually get applause, but everyone's like, hey, great party. You know, Thomas and Costa and JB are finally cool. I feel like the impression we were supposed to get is that, you know, the kids had fun. And maybe we destroyed a couple of cars, but that's what car insurance is for. And, you know, the kids really did have a great night. And isn't that wonderful? And I just gotta say, looking at that party, some kids had a great night. And even though they didn't depict this, just the things they did depict would lead you to believe that there were multiple sexual assaults. At least one kid would have been hospitalized for a drug or alcohol overdose. Like, if this party actually happened, there would have been a lot of not fun stuff going down.
Libby, aren't you being like a square old person right now?
100%.
Aren't you? Yeah, so like I shouldn't just do what I feel like doing and like blah, 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 responsibility? Isn't that boring?
You shouldn't take 3 different types of drugs at the same time unless you've really got that shit worked out. Don't eat ecstasy off of the floor.
That was tough to watch.
That was really rough. You're already dehydrated from alcohol.
We're supposed to just go with it because it's a movie, but no one has any reason to even think that it's ecstasy other than there's a bunch of pills and one guy yells it's ecstasy. Also, if you see a bunch of pills like that, it's probably not ecstasy. It's probably opiates. That's what most of the pills are. That's what people buy. So that part was hard. I didn't like that part.
So yeah, if you're doing that, I think that's a bad idea. And if you're raping a drunk person, I also think that's a bad idea. And also, they did establish that several people at this party are not high schoolers.
Yeah, well, to talk briefly about the cultural... This movie also did not receive any attention from the Oscars or the BAFTAs. And to talk briefly about the cultural impact... Yeah, as we all remember, once this movie came out for about 2 years, anytime anyone wanted to have a party, they would tell you it's going to be a Project X party, which means they don't care if a lot of people show up and have a riot, even if they don't have a good time, apparently. And there were several Project X copycat projects. There was one in Houston where somebody was killed in a gunfight when the police showed up and someone got mad about that. There was one in the Netherlands that caused probably about $2 million, $1.5 million worth of dollars in damages in a small town in the Netherlands. There was one in Michigan where like 30 people ended up overdosing on heroin, maybe because they just grabbed a bunch of random pills that they thought were ecstasy. Please don't do that. So several deaths, several sexual assaults, and many arrests were documented as a result of people copying this film. That is a fact.
You know, I talk about how like realistic and immersive this was for me. The fact that only thing that gets damaged is property is fantasy. Yeah.
I mean, to me, I don't know that we can make any real generational comment on it. But like you, the thing that I most felt when I watched this movie is I thought, this is what people that I know would do.
Yeah.
Whatever we want to judge about that. I guess there is something to the film not doing what Superbad does and try to lull us in by giving us characters that are unrealistically sweet. People aren't that sweet, and there's nothing wrong with accurately portraying people in a film. And I'm sure that people can enjoy this movie and still not want to be a person that gets people killed or whatever. It's just kind of fun and interesting to watch. I can totally appreciate that element of it. But I think Superbad, like you're saying, is a movie that has one foot in 70s idealism and is about the power of friendship and being a virtuous person in an anarchic world, and one foot in like, fuck everybody, just do what feels good right now, who cares about the consequences. And it can't really decide which one it's in. That means it does have crossover appeal to both sides, and that's part of what made it successful. Project X does not have that. We have characters that are basically totally amoral, and we just have to deal with that.
When Costa's introduced, he's clearly the worst person ever. And we get some juxtaposition to Thomas. Like, Thomas is at least not as bad as Costa, but Thomas still does several shitty things.
Yeah. I mean, I think where the movie does venture back into that territory and begins to fail is at the end, when we see Thomas have his reconnection with Kirby, and we're sort of supposed to be happy for them. It seems to me that Thomas is a classic case of somebody who feels bad when they get in trouble and have to face the consequences, but doesn't feel bad if they get away with it. That seems to be the character. And
Well, Thomas does have a couple of things that he actually cares about, unlike Costa. So, mainly his dog.
Of course, got it. That's the one way we can sanitize our otherwise grossly acting characters, is give them a little animal. Yep. Yeah.
I do have to say, I am not confident that animals were not harmed in the making of this movie. I really don't think that dog liked being in the bouncy castle. I'm looking at his face and he's having a bad time.
They put him up in some way in those balloons.
I don't know what was going on with the balloons. I'm sure there was lots of movie magic. Yeah. In at least one of those shots, that's definitely a fake dog. Uh-huh. I would believe that he was having a bad time in those balloons. Uh-huh. I would also believe that the arrangers said the dog was fine in the balloons. He gets smoke blown in his face, and he gets bounced around in a bouncy castle. And I don't think the dog liked that.
Yeah, I mean, Thomas is supposed to be the good guy with his save the dog moments. But first of all, I know he's a teenager. He's doing a truly terrible job at protecting this dog. Mm-hmm. And even once the party has totally gone out of control and his house is totally invaded, any reasonable person would be like, well, there's nowhere for the dog to go now. He forgets / decides he doesn't really care and want to go for his party. So they really failed to put me on Thomas's side with this dog thing because, yeah, he's like one level better. But once he actually is at a cool party, he just doesn't really care anymore.
Yeah, so I thought Thomas was an extremely realistic character. Mm-hmm. And I think when I was watching Superbad, I was constantly aware of the fact that I was watching a movie and we need to hit the story beats of a movie. And, there were way more actual funny jokes in Superbad, although I think many of the jokes were not funny. Project X has very few actual funny jokes.
It's not that funny for a comedy. It's not that funny.
There's a lot of jokes, but most of them are awful.
I think Costa is supposed to be funny, but he's not funny.
I think Costa just thinks he's funny.
He's a tone-setting character, and I accept that, but he's not funny.
So the whole time in Superbad, I felt like I was watching a movie. In Project X, I felt like I was watching a movie in like the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes, which is where we sort of do all the like story stuff. We establish Thomas's relationship with his dad, and then we resolve that at the end. The Kirby getting together with Kirby at the end situation. But for most of the middle of it, I was like, oh, I'm watching a documentary. Like this seems very realistic to me. I did get fully immersed.
Well, we asked, I guess, the same question for Superbad. In Project X, are Thomas, Costa, and or JB, are they the good guys? Are they protagonists of the story? And if them or not, is there a villain in this story? Is there a villain? Are they the villain?
Yeah, so I think most of the film is not really a film. It doesn't have like screenwriting elements, except for, the very beginning and the very end. So I think if I have to approach this from like a scripting perspective, Thomas is the protagonist. The villain is Thomas's dad. Maybe if Thomas's dad hadn't been so uptight at the beginning, Thomas wouldn't have felt the need to push the envelope. And then the villain is not defeated, but is reconciled at the end. Because Thomas proves himself to his father by destroying his car.
Yeah, we talked a little bit before about how Project X really is a close match to the 1982 Tom Cruise film Risky Business. Mm-hmm. And the structure of like the teen is there, his parents go away for the weekend, he's going to have a party, his mom makes him drive the uncool car and he wants to drive the cool car. Risky Business is a more socially and politically minded movie, other than being anti-social and anti-political, perhaps, in Project X. Risky Business is like a commentary on Reaganism, and like he's supposed to be, everyone's trying to teach him to be a businessman and do free enterprise. And so he's like, he sort of stumbles into starting a brothel at his house while his parents are away. I think that's a business. I think that's free enterprise, so it's sort of a commentary.
Reagan would be fine with it.
You're right. It's sort of a commentary about the free market ethic. But yeah, so many of the story beats, the car going into the pool when everything goes crazy. And so that closing scene is one of the most direct references to Risky Business, because in Risky Business, when similar events have happened and his dad's car is also ruined and he comes home, in Risky Business he comes home and when they're standing by the pool, they have the same dad to son talk, and his dad says, I'm really proud of you because you were able to get into Princeton. not knowing that the reason he got into Princeton is he invited his Princeton advisor to his brothel party.
Okay.
And he had a good time at the brothel party. Whereas in this movie, it's the same cinematography, but his dad is like, no, I actually just think it's really cool that you had a crazy party. I think that's great. Forget all the other stuff.
I'll pay $70,000 for your crazy party.
Yeah, that'd be a lot more than $70,000.
He's got insurance.
That's a good point. It is interesting to see how much the film is copying the template of Risky Business, and then at every point they're like, how can we make this more direct, more sensational, more I don't want to say mindless in a meaningless way, but more valueless is the term I'm looking for. If you really like Project X, I guess I'm sort of not being entirely complimentary about the movie. If you really like Project X and you wanted to see some other movies that had the same ideas, you might really like Risky Business. I also thought an interesting recommendation I would make, if maybe you don't like Project X, but you want to see some movie with some of the same pieces, you might want to check out The Fire, The Greatest Party That Never Happened, the Netflix documentary about the Fire Festival.
Yes.
Because that also has a lot of those same elements of crazy party, slightly aspirational content that you can also get in on your schadenfreude and watching all of these people make foolish decisions and have to deal with the consequences of it. So I just wanted to put that out there. If you like Project X or you don't like Project X, you might want to check out Risky Business or the Fire documentary because you might find them appealing or fix some of the problems in Project X. Yeah, like the Fire Festival, they don't want to get into it in the film for obvious reasons, but the real problem is the reason you shouldn't try to do a Project X party at your house, regardless of the fact that it's going to do a lot of damage and people might get hurt, is that you have to remember that if you get 2,000 people in the same place and you ask them to stay there for 12 hours, they're going to need a lot of infrastructure. Where are the bathrooms? Where are the trash cans? Where's the water?
So there is one shot where you can see a porta-john during the party. I totally believe that was not meant to be diegetic, and that was just there for the actual partiers. But I am genuinely curious where all these people are going to the bathroom.
Yeah, I mean, your house does not have the infrastructure to support 2,000 people. It's not like, well, it'll be fine for 12 hours.
Or even 800.
Yeah. Which of the characters would you most want to go to a party with? Or least go to a party with?
Who would I least want to go to a party with?
Or most, either direction.
Least is Costa.
Okay, well, sorry, Costa.
Most is Kirby.
Oh, okay.
She seems the most normal.
She seems chill. Yeah, I guess. All right, okay. That doesn't sound like...
Actually, least is T-Rick.
Oh, interesting.
I feel like I can handle Costa. At this point in my life, I'm not afraid of a shitty 17-year-old. I'm afraid of T-Rick.
Well, now I feel very pro T-Rick. I mean, if you didn't steal all of T-Rick's drugs, and that's many thousands of dollars worth. Now, maybe blowing up a whole house, blowing up yourself with a flamethrower is not a good response to that situation. But he was pretty chill at the beginning, honestly. Maybe you and T-Rick would get along great.
I think we might get along great, but I think also 40% chance he just punches me right in the nose.
Okay. Well, we wouldn't want that to happen.
I don't want to be around people who are on drugs if I don't know what drugs they're on.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a healthy policy to have.
Okay.
I just want to have some sort of expectation. Are you gonna freak out? Or are you just gonna be
percentage chill? Freak out chance?
Yeah. Are you on ketamine? Reported. Cool. We can hang out. Are you on PCP? Goodbye.
A good point.
Best case scenario, you're gonna just throw up on me, which is also an unpleasant experience.
Fair. Yeah, in Superbad, like the one ethic that they do hold to is the very basic tribal ethic. Mm-hmm. These people are my friends. I will maybe be mean to them, but be more loyal to them than other people. And to a lot of people, that's a really powerful and inspiring ethic, and part of why they like Superbad. In Project X, do they even do that? Do they even hold to the bro code or whatever language you want to use there? Do they even sacrifice for each other at any point? Really?
I think Costa, I hate this. Costa designates some high-value girls, one might say, to be, for Thomas. He's like...
I see.
I think Costa doesn't try to get with Alexis, because he's
fair.
Like, she's the hottest girl at the party.
This is your party. He says something to that effect.
This is your birthday. You should get to fuck Alexis.
I think that does count.
Yeah.
I think that does count.
So Costa's the one with bro code. I don't think Thomas or JB particularly have one. We don't get a lot of JB characterization, to be fair.
Yeah, JB's job just seems to be even nerdier than the other two.
Yeah, makes Thomas and Costa look good in comparison. Or possibly he makes them look worse. So I think we've already made clear what we think the right order of these films is. My niece recommended that we do Project X, then Superbad, even though that goes against our default policy of doing the older movie first. I think this was the wrong choice, Claudia. We still love you. I think you gotta go Superbad first, then Project X. Even if you ignore any of the sort of film history element of it, Superbad is mainly about getting to a party, and Project X is mainly about being at a party. So the night makes more sense if we do the getting to and then the being at. One of the things that surprised me about Superbad, I think because I had just seen Project X, was how little time we actually spent at the party. It's a road trip.
It wasn't sold as a big party movie, to be fair to the team. They didn't say it was a big party movie. It's a teen. Mm-hmm. I think they sold it as a road trip. That's mostly what's in the commercials. But you're right. It's really not a party movie. There's 2 parties, and we don't spend a lot of time at them, and they don't go great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do think you got to do Superbad first. I mean, I wonder if part of it is that you and I are over 30. Mm-hmm. Maybe if we were younger people, we would find Superbad very distant and kind of hard to identify with. And then it might make sense to see Project X and to sort of be like, okay, yeah, a party movie. I know what party movies are like. And then like, hey, let's go look at a historical party movie. And that I could maybe see that working better. But yeah, if you remember Superbad coming out and you like already really feel comfortable with that, I struggle to see how we would put Project X first, just because Project X does reference Superbad so much. I mean, the character of Costa is dressed and hairstyled and everything else directly as a reference to the Jonah Hill character. And like you said, Project X is a lot more intense. You talked about how, it's going to make you tired. It's not exactly a great... You don't want to watch Project X and then go watch another movie.
Flashing lights.
Yeah. And also it's going to desensitize you. Project X, what people liked about it is it had the most wild and crazy teen stuff that they'd actually kind of put in a movie yet. And for good or for bad, that's what people watched it for. And Superbad is not going to live up. It's not as raunchy. It's not as crazy. Because it's not about the 2 wildest, most crazy kids, or the 3 wildest, most crazy kids. It's actually about dorky, relatable kids who try to be wild and aren't. And how they fail to do that. So I think most people would like Superbad first and then watch Project X. Again, I think that's true if you don't know either of these movies really well. If you know Project X really well, then maybe watch Project X first, and then Superbad will be more interesting as a comparison to be giving it more context. That's the case where I could see it working. But I think we would have had a better time watching Superbad first, probably. And we made the decision to switch the order even after watching it because they do analyze in that direction much more naturally.
But if you want a break from Horny Bros after this, and frankly, Hoffman, we're moving in a different direction for next month's films. David, what are we doing?
We are doing Princess Mononoke from 1997 and The Green Knight from 2021.
So, Ghibli fans, we are honoring you. Also, we are going to be watching the dub of Princess Mononoke. I've never seen the sub, so I will be living in a world uninformed by the original Japanese script. So use that to inform your viewing decisions. And The Green Knight will be our first proper sword and sorcery fantasy film. So we're checking off our genre checkboxes as we go. We're getting there.
That's right.